And these 2 centuries are absolutely crucial in European development. They begin with a world of privilege, poverty, disease, and inequality, the so-called old regime, whose way of life and standard of living were not much different from that of the Romans or the Chinese Empire. And it ends with cities, technology, a new kind of state, and mass modern society. At the end of this period in 1914, Europe is like our own world, and a new human self set in a new social reality has become the dominant actor. And the lives we study affect and create this process. Some are monarchs, some are politicians, some affect the economy, some have to do with gender relations, some have to do with industry, banking, or science. There are philosophers, writers, and artists. In one lecture, we shall look at the disaster of a whole people, the Irish famine. And they're the actors. That generation is the biography, the collective biography for that lecture. Now, this course is frankly an experiment. I have never done it before, and I have never seen anybody crazy enough to try it either. This is simply something that nobody's done before. And the basic question is, can you do it? Can lives embody the great forces and factors that historians often describe as impersonal? Is biography a way to see the whole story through the optic of an individual? That's the challenge for lecturer and student alike. Now, what is this great transformation of Europe about? The transformation from the old regime to mass society. The term itself, old regime, is a historic artifact. It was invented after the French Revolution to describe what went before. It describes a lost world of privilege, aristocracy, serfdom, and poverty. Now, how does it become the modern world of cities, technology, mass movements, and equality? And the main features of the transformation I'd like now just to outline very briefly. There's a sudden explosion of power, European power, in the period that we're looking at. Between 1715 to 1914, Europe becomes supreme in the world, and it becomes obvious. By 1914, Europe, together with the English-speaking former colonies, the United States and Japan, enjoyed a near monopoly on high technology. And you can think of it, a symbol of it, in something like the gunboat diplomacy. A small European state like Belgium could send a gunboat up the Congo and subdue great empires and tribes. A second change, which we take for granted now but is fundamental, is the rise of the secular state. In Europe, for the first time in human history, a state founded on reason and natural law grows up. It ends the divine right of kings and the whole traditional way of seeing kingship and rule. And in this, there is a kind of social contract, a great revolutionary experiment. The state is the creation of the people, as the Constitution of the United States says. The people contract, so to speak, to construct their new authority. And this new state expresses the people's will. It can be conceived as a reformer. It can provide welfare. It can provide education. It can provide public health, clean water, whatever the citizens want it to do. Now, with that change, the belief in the yoke of sin, the conviction that mankind is born in sin, gives way in those 2 centuries that we shall be studying to the idea that human nature is fundamentally good, and that it can be shaped by our own efforts and indeed by the activity of the state. The Great Enlightenment project begins between 1715 and the 1760s, and its idea was to use human tools to perfect human nature. And this Enlightenment project continues really, I suppose, until the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the end of communism. For all the modern isms, fascism, communism, liberalism, nationalism, believed they knew how to make us happy and virtuous by human devices. A third feature of this great transformation, again we sort of take for granted, but we need to think about, is the exploitation of science and technology. There's an agricultural revolution which brings new crops and new rotations, and for the first time in human history, famine disappears, and it happens in our period after 1848. There's new technology. The steam engine multiplies the capacity of labor by multiples measured in horsepower, and by the